Captain Joshua Quinn's hands gripped the controls of the Erebus with the steady precision of a veteran pilot, navigating the cold expanse of space. His mind was half on the star charts and half on the mission: deliver supplies to Eden Prime, a peaceful Earth colony nestled in the outer rim. Easy enough, or so it seemed, the kind of routine job that made for the perfect break from the grind of actual combat missions. As the ship hummed smoothly along, a blinking red light suddenly interrupted his thoughts. "Captain," Lieutenant Carter's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with urgency. "We're getting a distress signal from Eden Prime. They're reporting an unknown vessel approaching. A large one. Very large." Quinn frowned, turning the ship's course slightly to adjust. His eyes narrowed as the ship's scanners tried to get a fix on the mysterious craft. He had no love for surprises in space, especially when they involved unknown enemies. "Run a full scan. Let's figure out what we're dealing with," Quinn ordered, leaning forward into his seat. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and still no one had any answers. Carter couldn't identify the vessel, and communications were down. Nothing but static. Then came the first true warning sign. A massive shadow loomed on their starboard side, and before Quinn could react, a hail of energy blasts from the unknown ship sent a tremor through the Erebus. The shields flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the attack, but it was clear this wasn't a friendly visit. Quinn snapped into action. "Brace for impact," he shouted, grabbing the ship's steering yoke and yanking it to the left, sending the Erebus into a sharp evasive roll. The ship lurched and groaned in protest, but Quinn was a master of piloting under pressure. His focus was laser-sharp as he expertly weaved through the incoming barrage, but the enemy ship had already locked onto them. He could feel the weight of their firepower pressing in. "Captain, incoming boarding pod," Carter screamed, pointing at a flashing red warning. Before Quinn could give another order, the ship shook violently as something latched onto the hull. A hollow thud reverberated throughout the Erebus, followed by the sound of metal scraping against metal. "Damn it. Prepare for close-quarters combat," Quinn barked, drawing his blaster from his belt. The airlock hissed, and the door to the cargo bay opened with a rush of compressed air. An alien figure stepped through the now widened doorway, a tall, striking woman. Her skin glistened with an iridescent violet sheen, and her eyes glowed a bright, unnatural hue. She was dressed in what looked like an ornate battlesuit, with shimmering patterns of energy coursing through the fabric. Quinn's first instinct was to draw his weapon, but before he could, the woman spoke, her voice strong and confident, resonating with a strange authority that made the very air feel thicker. "I am Princess Alana of the Uroth Empire, and I've come for you, Earthling." Her words hung in the air, weighted with something he couldn't quite place. The arrogance of the statement made Quinn's blood boil, but there was something else, something beneath the surface that felt different from the usual enemy encounter. He stared at her, trying to gauge whether she was bluffing or not. "Excuse me," Quinn said, his hand still gripping his blaster, but no longer pointing it directly at her. "For me." Zalana's smile was predatory, almost amused. "Yes, you, Earthling. You will test the strength of your species in the coming battle. If you survive, I will grant you a favor. If not, then your people will have to answer for your failure." "Wait a second," Quinn said, narrowing his eyes. "You came all this way just to test me? And why would I trust you?" A soft chuckle escaped Zalana's lips, and she stepped closer. "Trust is not a requirement, Earthling. Strength, however, is. Now, prepare yourself." Before Quinn could respond, the entire ship jolted violently, throwing him off balance. The lights flickered, and an explosion echoed from somewhere below decks. Zalana didn't flinch. She simply raised a hand, and everything fell silent. The energy in the room shifted, as if her presence had caused the very air to bend. "Enough of your distractions," she said coolly, her voice cutting through the silence. "We are no longer in your territory. The battle begins now." Quinn took a step back, his eyes scanning her. It was then that he noticed a faint hum around her, an energy field shimmering just at the edges of her form. She wasn't just an alien. She was something more, something he had never encountered before. "Who are you people?" Quinn asked, his voice tinged with both confusion and curiosity. "I am a princess of the Uroth," she replied. "We are conquerors, yes, but we also seek strength. I have traveled across the stars to find one worthy of this challenge. And you, Earthling, are that worthy one." "Well, I'm flattered," Quinn muttered under his breath, but his pulse was quickening. This was no ordinary confrontation. There was a depth to her words, a purpose behind her actions that Quinn couldn't quite understand, but instinct told him it was dangerous. Suddenly, a new voice broke through the tension. Lieutenant Carter's voice, now frantic. "Captain, the enemy ship is starting to deploy ground troops. We need to act now." Zalana's eyes flicked toward the control panel in the corner, and with a flick of her wrist, it powered down completely. "There is no need to run, Earthling," she said, her gaze returning to Quinn. "The battle has already begun, and I cannot wait for you to experience what comes next." A second later, the air seemed to grow heavier, as if the very space around them was bending. Quinn could feel the shift, a strange weight pressing down on him. His heart was pounding in his chest, his mind racing through every tactical scenario he could think of. This was no simple enemy. And then, as if the universe had frozen, Zalana's lips parted once again, her voice filled with an irresistible command. "Hurry up and slide it in already. Earthling, the princess can't wait." Quinn blinked, unsure whether she meant what he thought she meant. His confusion must have shown, because Zalana's eyes glinted with amusement. But beneath that amusement lay something far more deadly, something that told him that his next actions would decide not only his fate, but that of his entire species. "Prepare, Earthling. You are about to discover what true strength is." This version of Chapter 1 sets the stage with immediate action, a unique alien encounter, and the first hints of tension between Quinn and Zalana. It builds intrigue around Zalana's motives and presents Quinn's challenge in a way that hooks the reader with both humor and a sense of urgency. The phrase from the title is incorporated as part of Zalana's confident declaration, adding both humor and tension to the scene. Let me know if you'd like to expand or adjust any part. The Erebus groaned as Zalana's presence filled the room. Quinn's mind raced as the alien princess stood before him, her violet eyes shimmering with an intensity that could only mean one thing. This wasn't just a casual encounter. He was about to face something much bigger than a random pirate raid or a simple diplomatic mission gone awry. This was a test, one that would push him to his limits. "You are prepared, Earthling," Zalana said, her voice cold and commanding, her eyes never leaving his. "But are you truly ready to face me?" Quinn didn't flinch. He knew what this was. It was a challenge, and his pride as a soldier wouldn't let him back down. He squared his shoulders, taking a breath to steady himself. If the princess thought she could intimidate him, she was about to learn just how far an Earthling would go to survive. "I'm always ready," Quinn said, his voice steady. He raised his blaster, aiming at Zalana's chest. It was a calculated move, one that he hoped would show her he wasn't intimidated, despite the growing sense of unease in his gut. Zalana's lips curled into a smirk. "You think you can win this with a simple weapon?" she mocked, raising a hand. The blaster in Quinn's grip suddenly vibrated, and with a flick of her fingers, it flew from his hand, clattering against the far wall. Before Quinn could react, Zalana was on him. The speed of her movement was like a blur, her shimmering energy field illuminating the room. She slammed her palm into his chest, sending him skidding back across the floor. Quinn's heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to regain his balance. "Is this all you have, Earthling?" Zalana taunted, her voice dripping with mockery. "Your weapons are no match for me, but I must admit, your resilience is impressive." Quinn's breath came in sharp gasps, and his body screamed at him to slow down. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Zalana stepped forward, and Quinn barely had time to react. She was upon him again, but this time, he was ready. As she attempted to strike with her glowing blade, he ducked and dodged, his earthling reflexes giving him an edge, albeit a small one. He grabbed her wrist mid-strike, feeling the electric hum of her energy field crackle through his skin. Their eyes locked, and for a split second, Quinn saw something unexpected in Zelana's expression: respect. But before he could capitalize on the moment, she twisted her body, breaking free of his grip and flipping him onto the floor with a move that was almost too fast for his eyes to follow. He grunted as he hit the cold metal of the ship's floor, but quickly rolled to his feet. "You're fast," he admitted, wiping blood from a cut on his lip. "But I'm not done yet." Zelana tilted her head, her expression curious. "You surprise me, Earthling. Most would have given up by now." She circled him, the faint hum of her energy field still pulsing in the air. "I see now that your kind is resilient. But resilience alone will not win this fight." Quinn clenched his fists, focusing his mind. This wasn't just about brute force. Zelana's strength was overwhelming. But if he could outthink her, if he could use his own ingenuity and the things that made humanity unique, maybe, just maybe, he'd stand a chance. "You're right about one thing," Quinn said, taking a step forward. "I'm not just here to throw punches. I'm here to win." With that, he dashed toward the control panel in the corner of the room, his feet pounding against the metal floor. Zelana's eyes widened slightly as she prepared to intercept, but Quinn had already activated the emergency lockdown. The room's gravity shifted, sending him flying toward a nearby support beam. Zelana's energy field flared, but she wasn't fast enough. He used the momentum to grab hold of the beam and swing himself back toward her, surprising her with a quick jab to her side. Zelana staggered, more surprised than hurt, and she glared at him. "Impressive," she muttered, the first sign of true respect showing on her face. "But that trick won't save you." The energy in the room shifted again, more intense this time. Zelana raised her hand, and the air around them began to vibrate. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I've never faced an Earthling quite like you. Perhaps you are the one I've been waiting for." Before Quinn could react, she unleashed a burst of energy so powerful that it sent him hurtling backward into the wall. His body slammed into the hard surface, pain radiating through every muscle. He gasped for breath, feeling the burn of exhaustion setting in. "How much longer can you keep up, Earthling?" Zelana asked, her tone now almost teasing. "I'm curious. Will you fall to your knees, or will you stand and fight?" Quinn staggered to his feet, wiping blood from his brow. "I'm not finished yet." As he rose, Zelana's expression softened, and for a moment, Quinn could have sworn he saw something different in her eyes. Was it admiration, or was it something else? It was fleeting, but it was there, and that small shift made all the difference. "I knew you would be different," she said, her voice now a little less mocking. "Your spirit is what sets you apart. But even so, you are not yet ready to face the full might of the Uroth." With a sudden motion, Zelana brought her hand down, and the room's gravity shifted again. Quinn felt his body grow heavier, each movement more difficult than the last. She was using the ship's internal systems against him, forcing him to fight under her control. But Quinn wasn't going to give up. Not now. He gritted his teeth and dug deep, pulling every ounce of strength from his body as he pushed back against the gravitational pull. His muscles screamed in protest, but he wasn't about to stop. Slowly, painfully, he began to move toward Zelana, his eyes locked onto hers. "Let's finish this," he said, his voice strained but determined. Zelana's eyes sparkled with something close to delight. "Very well, Earthling. Show me what you're truly made of." And just like that, the fight escalated once more. Quinn wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting to prove that humanity, Earthlings, were not to be underestimated. Quinn's chest heaved as he fought to maintain his balance, his body still recovering from the intense gravity shifts Zelana had forced upon him. He hadn't expected her strength, but now, His own determination to outlast her was beginning to pay off. He could feel the pressure in the room, the raw energy vibrating around them, as if the air itself was charged with the anticipation of what would come next. Zelana stood a few feet away, her violet eyes studying him with growing interest. The power that emanated from her was undeniable, but there was something more now, something in her gaze that made Quinn uneasy. Respect, perhaps even admiration, but it was fleeting and the tension in the room was palpable. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "You're not like the others," Zelana remarked, her tone softer now, a sharp contrast to her earlier aggression. "I thought Earthlings were weak, but you proved me wrong. You're resourceful, a worthy opponent." Quinn wiped the sweat from his brow, his muscles still sore from the fight. "I told you, I'm not like the others," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "And Earth's not going to roll over just because some alien princess wants a fight." Zelana's lips curled into a smile, a touch of amusement in her eyes. "You talk big, Earthling, but you have yet to see the true power of the Uroth." Before Quinn could respond, a sudden crash reverberated through the ship, followed by the screech of metal against metal. The sound was unnerving, unnatural. Something had breached the outer hull. The Erebus shook violently, and alarms blared throughout the ship, throwing both of them off balance. Zelana's expression shifted immediately. The amusement vanished, replaced by something darker. Concern, perhaps? Or fear? Quinn didn't know. But whatever it was enough to make her act. She turned sharply, her voice commanding. "We are not alone." Quinn followed her gaze as the room flickered and the lights dimmed. For a brief moment, everything was still, the sudden silence oppressive. Then, as if on cue, the comms console exploded in a burst of sparks, and Carter's voice, frantic and distorted, echoed through the room. "Captain, the ship's been compromised. Someone's taken control of the lower decks. There's a traitor among us. They're turning the crew against us." A chill ran down Quinn's spine as he processed Carter's words. A traitor? Someone on their ship had betrayed them? His hand instinctively went for his blaster, but it wasn't there. Zelana, noticing his movement, raised a hand, her energy field surrounding her body like an aura. "Stay close," she ordered, her voice more serious now, her earlier arrogance gone. "The real danger is not me. It's whoever is attacking us from within." Quinn nodded, his pulse racing. The stakes had just been raised. If they didn't deal with this threat quickly, the Erebus and everyone on board would be lost. The fact that someone inside the crew was working against them made everything infinitely more dangerous. Was it Carter? Or someone else entirely? Zelana moved toward the door, her energy blade humming to life in her hand. "We will take back control of the ship. But first, we must deal with the traitor." The tension in the air was thick as they moved swiftly through the narrow hallways of the Erebus. Zelana's glowing blade illuminated the path ahead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Quinn's mind was working overtime, running through the possibilities. Who could have betrayed them? The idea of Carter being involved sent a pang of doubt through his chest. He'd known the lieutenant for years. But if Carter was a traitor, then everything had changed. As they reached the central command deck, Quinn's worst fears were confirmed. The door to the command room was wide open, the lights flickering in an unsettling rhythm. Zelana gestured for Quinn to stay back, and with a fluid motion, she moved inside, her blade raised and ready. The room was empty, but it didn't feel empty. "Commander Quinn," came a voice from the shadows. Quinn's heart skipped a beat. Carter stepped into the light, but there was something different about him. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth Quinn had known. In his hand, he held a plasma rifle, its barrel pointed directly at Quinn. "So it's you?" Quinn said, his voice low with disbelief. "I never thought it'd be you, Carter." Carter's lips twisted into a grin, but there was no humor in it. "You thought you were the hero, didn't you, Captain? Always doing the right thing, always making the big decisions. But You're just a pawn in a much bigger game. Zalana stepped forward, her blade crackling with energy. You betrayed us. The Uroth will not tolerate traitors. Carter chuckled, shaking his head. The Uroth? You really think they're the ones I've been working with? His eyes flickered to Quinn, then back to Zalana, his gaze hardening. No, I'm not with the Uroth. I'm with someone much more powerful. Someone who understands the true potential of Earth. You think your little rebellion is going to stop the future? Think again. Quinn took a step forward, his hand slowly moving to his side where his weapon should have been, but it was still out of reach. What do you mean, Carter? Who are you working with? The answer came in a voice Quinn had never expected to hear. We're working with the Zort Dominion. Both Quinn and Zalana froze. The Zort Dominion, the most feared empire in the galaxy. Their fleet had raised entire worlds. Their technology leagues beyond anything Earth had. They were the stuff of nightmares, and Quinn had never once believed they would have any interest in Earth. Carter laughed bitterly, clearly enjoying their stunned silence. The Zort have plans for Earth, big plans, and I'm the one who's going to help them realize it. Earth will bow to the Zorth, or it will burn. Either way, I'm on the winning side. Quinn's blood boiled. You're a traitor to your own people. They'll never accept you. Oh, I think you'll find, Captain, Carter sneered, that I'm the one who's always been right. Without another word, he raised his rifle, aiming it directly at Quinn. But before he could pull the trigger, Zalana acted. Her blade sliced through the air with blinding speed, disarming Carter in an instant. He stumbled backward, but Zalana was on him before he could make another move, her energy blade stopping just inches from his throat. You are a fool, she said coldly. Your betrayal will cost you everything. Carter's eyes flashed with defiance, but he didn't speak. Zalana's blade hummed with the intensity of her power, and Quinn knew this wasn't going to end well for the traitor. But even as Carter was subdued, Quinn's mind was racing. The Zort Dominion, they were on the verge of war, and Carter had just opened a door that Quinn wasn't sure he was ready to face. The fight for Earth's future had just taken a terrifying turn. The weight of Carter's betrayal hung heavy in the air. Quinn stared at his former lieutenant, now kneeling at Zalana's feet, a look of bitter resignation etched across his face. He had thought Carter was a friend, a loyal member of the crew. But now, everything had changed. Earth was no longer just fighting for survival. It was fighting to maintain its place in a galaxy full of far more powerful and ruthless enemies. Zalana's blade hovered above Carter's throat, the energy humming with lethal intent. But she didn't strike. She seemed to be waiting for something. Quinn could see the cold fire in her eyes, a reflection of the stakes they were facing. Do it, Quinn said, his voice low, but he wasn't entirely sure whether he was urging Zalana to end Carter's life or just wanting to move on from the moment. He didn't know if he could trust Carter anymore, but the reality was he never truly had. Let's finish this and get back to fighting the real enemy. Zalana's gaze flickered to Quinn, a brief moment of contemplation passing between them. Then, with a quick motion, she deactivated her blade. I'm not in the habit of killing those who still have use, she said, her voice colder than usual. But your betrayal will not be forgotten. Quinn didn't respond. The betrayal wasn't what concerned him anymore. The Zort Dominion, the empire Carter had sold out to, was a much greater threat. They were coming for Earth, and soon nothing would be the same. With a sharp motion, Zalana stepped back, releasing Carter. The former lieutenant stumbled to his feet, his eyes wild with anger. You don't understand, he spat, glancing between Quinn and Zalana. You think you can fight the Zorth? They have fleets, armies, and weapons you can't even begin to imagine. They'll crush your world in an instant. Quinn clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. And we'll fight them anyway. We'll die trying. Better that than surrender. Carter laughed bitterly, but there was a hint of fear in his voice now. You'll see, he said, his voice dark with foreboding. You'll all see. Quinn didn't waste another second on Carter. He turned to Zelana, his mind already shifting gears. How do we fight the Zorith? What do we need? Zelana's eyes narrowed, her focus intense. The Zorith are powerful, but they have weaknesses. The key to defeating them is not in strength, it's in strategy. They rely on overwhelming force, but they underestimate the value of intelligence and adaptability. Then we'll use that to our advantage, Quinn said, his voice steady with resolve. He looked back at the command deck, where the flickering lights had returned to normal. We need to gather our forces, contact Earth, and prepare for the war that's coming. Zelana didn't argue. She understood the stakes. And, for the first time, Quinn sensed that she wasn't just here to test him. She was here to fight beside him. To win. You think Earth can stand against the Zorith? She asked, her voice soft but challenging. Quinn's eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything felt heavy. But then, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. I don't think Earth has a choice. With that, they moved quickly, initiating the necessary protocols to re-establish control over the Erebus and prepare for the battle ahead. The crew, still in shock from Carter's betrayal, rallied behind them, the gravity of their situation pushing them into action. Hours later, Quinn stood on the bridge of the Erebus, looking out at the stars. The silence in the room was oppressive, but it was the calm before the storm. They had sent the distress signal to Earth. Reinforcements were on their way, but would they be fast enough? Time was running out. Zelana appeared beside him, her expression unreadable. The Zorith will not hesitate to strike. You need to prepare your people for what's coming. I know, Quinn replied, his voice grim, but we'll have the element of surprise. Earth isn't a target they expect. It'll take them longer to mobilize their full force, and that gives us time. Zelana's eyes glinted with something Quinn couldn't quite place, an emotion he hadn't seen in her before. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was trust. Whatever it was, it made him feel a bit less alone in the fight ahead. We'll need to outsmart them, Zelana said, her voice steady. Strength alone won't win this battle. But you've shown me that Earthlings are not without their own strengths. If you can hold your ground long enough, I will bring the Uroth fleet to your aid. Quinn nodded, grateful for her help. The Uroth Empire might not be Earth's allies by any traditional means, but right now, they were the best hope they had. The stakes were too high to waste time on politics. The door to the bridge slid open, and Lieutenant Carter, still under guard, was brought in. He had been silenced for now, but Quinn could feel the tension in the air between them. Carter had made his choice, but Quinn still had to make his. The future of Earth would depend on this moment, on the choices they made now. You're a traitor, Quinn said, his tone cold, and you're not leaving this ship until we finish what we started. Carter didn't respond, his eyes flashing with anger. He wanted to say something to fight back, but Quinn wasn't interested in words anymore. Earth's survival would depend on their ability to come together, even if that meant putting aside past friendships and trusting unlikely allies. The crew members filed in, gathered around Quinn and Zelana. There was an air of uncertainty among them. But Quinn knew the only way forward was through unity. They were no longer just a ship on a mission. They were a people facing a war that would determine their place in the universe. We fight for Earth, Quinn said, his voice carrying across the room, firm and unwavering. We fight because there's no other choice. Zelana's gaze met his, and in that moment, Quinn knew that they weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to prove that Earth, against all odds, was a force to be reckoned with. We will see this through, she said quietly. And with that, they began to prepare for the war that was coming. Facing the unknown